I'm delighted to be joined here by Martina Davis, who was diagnosed with posterior cortical atrophy after she noticed symptoms starting in her mid-50s. Thank you, Martina, for being here today to share your experience and your thoughts with us. So during this webinar, Dr. Burney will talk about how a good relationship with your GP and your GP practice is key to supporting a person with young onset dementia. Please, can you tell us a bit about your experience you had with your own GP when you first started to notice symptoms?
Yes, of course, Catherine. But firstly, I'd just like to say I'm absolutely delighted to be here and privileged, really, that you've asked me to do this. Firstly, I just really want to touch on pre-diagnosis. And pre-diagnosis is a really terrible time before you even get to the GP. And the reason it's a terrible time is because you're coming to terms with things yourself and all these weird and wonderful things that are happening. And PCA is actually very, very random. And for example, one of the first things that I had to deal with was the loss of being able to use my left hand to write. So I taught myself to write with my right hand. I just thought it was a nuisance. Then my numerical skills went. And so things have been ongoing since. So you've got all these random things going on. And the people around you are actually saying, get a grip, you're losing the plot. What are you going to do? You know, this isn't right. And sometimes it can be very, very hurtful. And I know this also from other people's stories, and some, you know, it's abusive sometimes. So that pre-diagnosis period never really seems to get mentioned very often. Now, I was very fortunate with my GP. It was when I lost the numerical skills, I actually went to see her and I said, there's something not right. I know there isn't. I know I'm not functioning in the same way. And I got a good measuring stick for this because I've been self-employed pretty much all my life. So, you know, chief cook and bottle washer, sales, admin, tea girl, getting the business in, delivering the service. So I actually measured it and I knew there was something wrong. And my last business was a gallery that I'd set up for local artists because I'd had a lucky break and I wanted to pass that on. So when I was at the GP's and she was talking to me, she actually said, Martina, I've lived through Daffodil Lane and the setting up of the gallery. She said, if you're sitting here telling me there's something wrong, there is something wrong and we need to get to the bottom of it. So I consider that I was very fortunate, and I know I'm fortunate because most of the stories are horror stories about the GPs. And she got an inkling, I think, that it wasn't Alzheimer's, it wasn't going to be particularly memory-led, but she wasn't in a position to do it. She had to do the memory tests, which is what she went ahead and did. So I consider my experiences when I first started to notice my symptoms, my GP sat up and listened.
That's so important that you had that relationship with your GP to be able to be open and honest, and she recognised that there was something not right and that needed to be investigated for you. And then after you received your diagnosis, what ongoing support have they provided to you and how has that helped you?
They have actually just been fantastic, and between two lady GPs, they handled me beautifully. Let me put it that way, in terms of they got really good coordination, or communication rather. That communication between them was absolutely brilliant, and I can remember being asked by one of them, this was during COVID, when you could actually go, you still could go to a GP's. When everybody else was pushing for telephone calls, they made a decision to give me the option of actually, and it didn't matter what it was, I could go and have a face-to-face. And that was so incredibly important. And it was such a tiny thing, but it made the biggest difference to me because PCA also affects hearing, but not in the same way as if you're losing your hearing. Now, since then, I am now wired for sound. I do need hearing aids, but I experience the difference in the messages within my brain for hearing. So they had taken that on board and knew that telephone calls weren't so great. And it's always been, and ever since, it's always been a face-to-face. And please don't ever hesitate to have your double appointment, you know. So I mean, that's just one tiny example of the ongoing support that they actually give me.
That's really good. And how important is it to have that support from your GP while you're going through this, the pre-diagnosis, through the diagnosis, and then ongoing?
It's actually invaluable. There's no other word to describe it, because you've got somebody that you can actually communicate with that understands. And like a lot of the rare dementias, a lot of the GPs don't know anything about them, and you know, the clues in the word, they're general practitioners. But my practice have been prepared to learn, I think. And this actually is cascaded down even to the receptionists that are on the desks. You know, they care very much about the patients that come through their door. And many moons ago, prior to being diagnosed, I went in to pick a prescription, and the receptionist said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just feeling under the weather." And I went back home. Within half an hour, I got a call from my GP, and she said, "Oh, one of the girls has come through and said, you don't look very well. I want to know what's going on." And we actually had a telephone call, and she said, "Right, come back to the surgery. I need to see you."
That's amazing to have that.
Yeah.
That's, and in terms of your dementia, do they help you with provision of sort of support services, signposting you to where you can go? Have they helped you with anything like that?
They haven't. The memory clinic kind of took care of all of that. But they always say the door's always open. If I need something, if I need to know something, then just ask the question.
That's really good. And it sounds like they've been willing to learn and find out for you when you've needed some help.
Yeah.
So what improvements would you like to see in terms of how primary care support people with a diagnosis of young onset dementia and their families?
I would just love to see repeated across the country my experiences with the GP service, primary care services. It's really, really tough. And I think one of the biggest humps, I can't think of the word, but one of the biggest humps that needs to be overcome is this automatic assumption that all dementias are memory-led. I mean, even Alzheimer's, younger people that are having symptoms, they're not necessarily memory-led at that point because of the age. And so if you're failing those memory tests, and you're either being told, "Oh, come back in 6 months," or "There's nothing we can do for you, there's nothing wrong, it must be stress, or it must be anxiety, you know, let's give you some let's say tranquilizers," then, you know what I mean. Well, you're getting the gun out, can't you? But you know, that's not the answer. And I do know people that was the automatic reaction of the GP. Now, if you've got something that's not advanced, which then becomes memory-led, those memory tests actually are not going to get you any closer to a diagnosis. So I don't know, and you know, treat me as being simple here, but you know, when people go into a GP and they say, "I've got these symptoms," and they give a list, and the GP actually has got a hunch, instead of there being the only facility available is to send people to the memory clinic, perhaps they should be sent to a neurologist. Perhaps there are other places as a starting point to actually, you know, get into that brain as soon as possible to see what's going on. I find it absolutely ludicrous that the diagnosis, the diagnostic period, is still so long. And yet there was all this cracking talk about this drug, which, oh, if it can get to people young enough, it's going to help. But if the diagnosis period is that long, all those period people have missed out.
Yeah, it's not going to help. Well, thank you very much, Martina, for sharing your experience with us. It's really lovely to hear what a positive experience you've had with your GP and continue to have with your GP. You've had consistent support from them. And I think that's really something that you've said to us a lot, that how important that is in your life. So it's really good to be able to share that with people today. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.